I'm going to do another video today on turning boxes. Today I'm going to do the wooden box, which is sort of the middle part of a series of 3-part videos that I'm doing. It's not going to, the box I'm going to do today isn't going to win any design awards or anything like that. It's not going to be anything special. It's just going to be a simple box so that you can see the different ways of holding the box and dealing with the tenon and how I turn them. So what I want to do now is show you some examples of boxes that I've made and show you the blank that I'm going to be working with today, and then we'll move on from there and start some turning. Here are some boxes that I've made recently. There's one in English boxwood, which was from a branch, so you can see the pith and the rings there on the lid. There's one in yew, which is it's got a sort of one side which has got some really nice figuring, and then the other side goes a little bit plain, a little bit pippy. But and then there's another one in ebony. All 3 boxes are turned exactly the same way on the lathe, and it's just a change in design, a change in proportions. But once the basic principle that we're going to run through today, once you've got that under your belt, then that's the grounding for everything that comes after it, and then you can play around with proportions and design and different things. The blank that I've found is a piece of elm. It was roughed out on, I don't know if the camera can see that, April 2012. So it should be ready by now, and we'll go ahead and get that on the lathe. I tend to always put the top of the box, the lid of the box, in the chuck first, and I go through the same steps on all the different types of designs as what I'm about to go through now. So the lid goes in, and I'm going to be forming a female tenon inside the lid, which will then suit a male tenon on the base. So you can do it the other way around. That there isn't any real sort of fors and against. It's just a method that I started doing and learnt how to do first, and so I tend to have stuck with it. So, like I say, this box is just going to be a very simple straight-sided box. So the first thing I'm going to do is true up the outside, true up this face, and it's important that this face is slightly concave. And that's because where the 2 halves meet, you want the outside edge to meet first. You don't want a gap or an uneven line around the edge of the box. So if this face is slightly concave, and the same with this face on the top of the box, again, will be slightly concave. When the 2 come together, you always get a nice join around the outside. I don't tend to use a lot of tools for box making. It's really just negative rake scrapers and occasionally a spindle gouge. Also, I normally have my full face respirator on. I normally have the MicroClean ambient air cleaner running in the background, and I will use the dust extractor today when I'm doing the sanding. But to reduce the noise in the workshop, I've not got the ambient air cleaner on. I've not got my full face mask on. I'm just going to wear a face visor, just so you can hear me better, and that I can do this box. So the same method as for the roughing out, just to take some of the stock out of the middle of the lid with a spindle gouge. At this stage now, I would cut in the female part of the tenon. It's a trade-off really when you choose how much wall thickness to leave in the lid, because obviously the wall thickness here plus the tenon will then determine the wall thickness of the base of the box. Not on all designs. On certain designs you can then undercut and create like a barrel shape, but on straight-sided or virtually straight-sided boxes it will determine that thickness. Now you don't want, elm is quite an open grain wood anyway, but you don't want the thickness that's left on the edge of the box to be too delicate, because as the box gets used and it's put on and off the base, you don't want it that thin that it's at risk of snapping or breaking. But at the same time you don't want it too chunky, because the box is very heavy and clumsy. So you have to strike a balance between the two. And I don't tend to measure a lot of things, so I don't really know what the measurements are, but it's roughly half this width, and that looks to be about a centimetre, about 10 mil. So somewhere between 4 and 5 mil is a kind of a rough guide what I aim for. So I'll cut that in now. Now the depth of this tenon, again, I don't tend to measure, I don't tend to work it out, but again, I would guess about 4 or 5 mil. If you make the tenon a lot deeper, then obviously you have to use more. You have to use more material. You lose more material here from making the male part of the tenon to fit the female, which is nice. You can get you can get a very nice suction fit, like a piston fit lid with a longer tenon. But you also lose a lot of wood from the joint, so your grain tends to wander a lot more because there's a lot more wood being taken from the middle area. So, and there's ways and means around that. You can put collars in of different woods and things to create an accent and things like that. But for a straightforward box, 4 or 5 mil depth for the tenon in the lid is about right. And I mentioned in the roughing out video that I thought roughing out was the real main important step in box making. This is the second step, and I can't emphasize this enough. If the female tenon in the lid isn't parallel, then the rest of the box just goes wrong. You'll have problems at every stage. So a little pair, I think these are called inside calipers, they're sprung calipers. And just put those into the tenon and sort of gently pull backwards and forwards and feel if there's any resistance. And this one is a little bit tight at the back of the tenon compared to the front. So in effect it's wedge shaped that way. So what I do is I just get the negative rate scraper, and I just want to take a little bit out of that back corner. So I'll just put a fresh edge on this scraper. And that might be it. It really isn't a huge amount, but it's such an important step in the box making process. And I can faff with this part for 10-15 minutes sometimes, going backwards and forwards between the front being too tight and the back being too tight, and trying to get the balance and trying to get it nice and parallel. There's still a little bit to come off the back. That's it, that's got it. So now I can, with a negative rake scraper, I'll just check the depth, just eyeball down using my finger, and it just needs to go a little bit deeper. But then with a negative rake scraper, I'll just clean up this grain inside here. When you've raised the burr on the negative rake scraper, you should be able to feel it on the top edge, and you should be able to see shavings like were coming off then. That's when you know the scraper is sharp. Now, the surface is okay, but I know I can get it better. Elm is quite coarse, so there's a little trick I can do where I can get some, well, I'm going to use lemon oil. But I use this stuff, but you can use Danish oil, any of the finishing oils, diluted sanding sealer. But lemon oil is great for this because it's backwards compatible. So no matter what you want to put on top of it, whether you want your final finish to be shellac or beeswax or one of the oils, the lemon oil doesn't get in the way. So just going to wet that surface with the oil. Put a fresh edge on the scraper and then make one more pass, very gentle pass. The camera probably can't pick it up. You'll have to take my word for it that that's just a little bit smoother. Excuse me, a little bit of a better surface to start sanding. Oh, the one other thing I want to do is I just want to, this little flat area just in here, I just want to clean that, make sure that's nice and clean with the negative rake before I start sanding. So the top surface is concave, inside's ready to sand, the tenon's parallel, everything's ready. I do not sand this surface at all. I do not try and sand any part of the tenon. As soon as you do, you will no longer have a perfectly concentric tenon, because as you sand, you basically create an oval. You sand away harder parts of the grain, and it no longer becomes a perfect concentric circle. But it's been cut perfectly cleanly. That's one of the benefits of the negative rake. So there's no need to sand it. So I very carefully with a sandpaper just sand inside here. So I'll do that now, and then the inside of the lid is done. A word on sandpaper: I tend to, on wooden boxes, I tend to use the Rhino Grip white. I use the Arbornet on resin or on hybrid boxes, but I don't like the Arbornet for just wood-turned items, or just wooden items, should I say. So I tend to use the Rhino Grip white, and for areas like this I cut it into strips, and just with a pencil write the grit on, just so that when I put them back over on the shelf over there all together I don't get them mixed up. And how I hold it so that my left hand makes sure that the sandpaper stays away from the area that I don't want to touch. So I'll just show that. It's also worth mentioning that your sanding speed should be roughly half of what your turning speed was. I must admit, I don't tend to know what my speed is. I just got a feel for it. But on the VB, there isn't a digital readout or anything. There's a grid of numbers, and you have to work out which pulley you're on and roughly whereabouts you are. But you always want to sand slower than what your turning speed is, because the sandpaper has to cut, and if it's too fast it just skims across the surface and generates heat. So that's 180 to 400. That's the sanding in the inside of the lid complete. Now there's dozens of different finishes you can use inside boxes. Microcrystalline wax, beeswax, the wood wax blends, oils. I must admit, on darker woods I normally tend to use a shell wax, triple E, and shell wax cream, which brings up a very high shine. But just for speed and during the video, I'm just going to use lemon oil, and then I can put hard wax oil or another finish over the top at another point. I like lemon oil as a finish. I like the fact it's matte and it gives a very neutral finish, but it has to be topped up every few months, and obviously if I sell the box that's no good. So that's the inside of the lid done. So now that comes out the chuck and the base goes in. And the first job I want to do is create, true up the outside, and then create a jam fit male tenon to jam the lid onto. And I'll talk more about that in a second. Like I say, I don't measure a lot, so I take the tenon roughly down to when I know it's definitely bigger than what it's going to be, and then I put a slope on it, and then I stop and have a look and check, and if it starts to just go onto the end of the tenon when there's a slope on it, I then straighten the tenon up and get a jam fit. But this is still too big, so I'm going to take some more off. too big. Nearly. That's it, it's just starting to go over the end of the tenon now. So what I do now is I resharpen the scraper, the negative rate scraper, and you can actually even see with the lemon oil, look, where it's starting to go on. It's left a footprint behind, so to speak. So I can straighten up the back of the tenon, and I want to achieve a jam fit. This will eventually be the final tenon for the fit of the lid, but right now I want a jam fit so I can remove the dovetail tenon and clean up the top of the box. So you can hear it starting to go on, and I could carry on forcing it on, but I'd never get it back off. It's still too tight. I'd got a gap on the joint, and I suddenly realised that the top of the tenon, male tenon, was bottoming out in the lid. There you go. So that goes all the way up now, and that's a jam fit, but it's not a ridiculous tight jam fit. If you're making a box with like a little finial, like this ebony one, and obviously you're in end grain and you've got this little finial, you don't want it that tight that when you've shaped the finial and you go to want to remove it, you break the finial off. So sometimes for that style of box, you can make the tenon a little bit looser, but you can put a little piece of masking tape across the joint so that when you put it on, it tightens the joint up. Never be tempted to use wet newspaper or wet kitchen towel. It just makes a mess and sticks to everything. It's soggy and horrible. You can use dry kitchen towel, that works just as well. But a little strip of masking tape is what I tend to use and what works best. So if I just line the grain up, and I'm just going to take a cleaning cut and chew up all of the outside and then get rid of this dovetail tenon on top. So you can use a scraper to get rid of this tenon, or you can use a spindle gouge, whatever you're confident with. that's the end grain, the top of the box cleaned up. The outside of the box is done. Obviously, this any design you want really. You could have put beads into the top, you could have inlaid another piece of wood, could have inlaid a piece of stone or resin into the top. Part of why I love box making is it's just so varied, and all the different designs, different shapes, and it's also quite quick to do, so it's very satisfying. This grain lines up really well. I was lucky, and this lines up well. But sometimes if the grain is a little bit out, you can do a couple of tricks to help disguise it. You can roll a couple of beads at each side of the joint, and that just throws the eye and helps to disguise that grain misalignment. You can leave it like this, or sometimes what I will do is just with a corner of a scraper, just go in and put a little chamfer and take the sharp edges off. And that's what I'm going to do today just before I sand it. So I'll just pop the lid off a second to make it easier and just take this corner off first. Then pop the lid back on and just do the same on the lid corner. And that's it really, the lid's ready to sand now, it's finished. Because this one's straight-sided, you could also sand the base. I might do it all in one go. But normally when the base is going to change shape, when it's reverse chucked, then you wouldn't normally sand the whole box like this together. But while you've got access and everything's straightforward, you might as well do it all at once. Just with the last grip, with the 400 grip, I just take that, just round that corner off, just take that very sharp edge off the corner and just make it nicer to hold. So that's it, the outside of the lid's done. So you can take that now off and put it to one side. The next step now is to hollow out the inside of the box, sand and finish it. And then after you've done that, the final step, and sometimes the most annoying step if you forget to do it, is to just take a shaving, a very fine shaving off this male tenon and check the fit of the lid again. And that's where you want to adjust and get the final fit, the perfect fit for your lid. It's also worth mentioning this face here is also cut backwards on a concave, which I'll do with a negative rate scraper when I do that final fit. So the majority can come out with a spindle gouge again, and then it can be cleaned up with a neg rake. stop and check the depth a moment. I didn't put my thumb there. Oh, it needs to go about 1/4 inch more. Some of these open-grained woods, like elm and ash, can be quite abrasive with the tools, and it will knock the edge, the burr, off the negative rate scrapers very quickly. So you just have to be mindful of that, and frequent trips back to the grinder and pop it back on. So the inside's ready to sand. So this last step now is to adjust the fit of the lid. As it is at the minute, it would be too tight for most people to take on and off. But it's a foul between too tight and too loose. So just take a little bit off and check it again. Still a bit too tight. Just take that corner off. Still just a touch too tight, and it looks like it's at the back of the tenon where it's binding. Tempting to leave it, but I know it's going to be just that slight bit too tight for most people to take on and off. So I'm just going to put a fresh edge on the scraper and just take one more, I think. Famous last words, one more, but I'll try. That's it. You can actually hear it as well. That little bit of a creak as it was going on and off has gone. So that's it, I'm happy with that. So I'll sand the inside now, and then the inside is finished. And the lid's finished, so all we have to do then is reverse chuck it and get rid of the tenon from the base, and the box is done. Again, I don't sand any of the mating surfaces, so none of the tenon is sanded, just the inside of the box. Just make sure that oil goes right into the corner, and that's it. So what I've done is I've put a piece of waste wood in the chuck, and I've created a female tenon to suit the male on the base of the box. This is exactly the same process as fitting the lid, but this time you're just creating it in a scrap piece of wood so that you can jam the base into it and clean up the bottom of the base. And that's it. The box is complete. Yes, there's the finished box. A little box in elm, and that principle of holding it initially in the chuck, then jam fitting the lid over the base, then finishing the inside of the base, then jam fitting the base over a waste piece of wood. Those steps are exactly the same for virtually all the boxes I make. And that's how you end up with a finished box that you can't tell how it's been held on the lathe. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed watching, and please subscribe if you did.